Take the same tomato plant, place it in the same black container, fill it with the same potting mix, and follow the same watering routine in Texas and Michigan. In Michigan, that dark pot may help the root zone warm faster and make better use of a shorter summer. In Texas, the same pot can absorb so much afternoon heat that the roots become stressed while the leaves still look green. One gardener may need every hour of sun. The other may need to protect the container before noon. Neither gardener is necessarily careless. They are growing the same crop under different rules, and tomatoes are only the beginning. Okra, sweet potatoes, cowpeas, eggplant, hot peppers, Malabar spinach, amaranth, bush beans, zucchini, cucumbers, kale, and collards all change their behavior as we move from the hot south to the cooler north and through the unpredictable middle of the country. By the end, you will have 5 questions that can replace a one-size-fits-all planting calendar. Stay with the final crop because it turns the entire north versus south comparison upside down. The first rule to replace is the idea that one American planting calendar can tell every container gardener what to do. A date on a calendar is only a starting point. A warm afternoon in March does not mean the soil is ready. Passing the average last frost date does not mean a heat-loving crop will grow quickly. And living in the same USDA hardiness zone as another gardener does not guarantee the same summer conditions. Hardiness zones are useful for understanding average winter cold, especially for perennial plants. But annual vegetables respond to much more than the lowest winter temperature. For container crops, 6 signals matter more than a generic national schedule. The first is your last spring frost and first fall frost. Together, they define the rough length of your frost-free season. The second is soil temperature. A warm season seed placed in cold, wet potting mix may germinate slowly, rot, or produce a weak seedling. The third is nighttime temperature. A sunny day can feel like summer, while cold nights keep peppers, eggplant, okra, and other heat lovers nearly motionless. The fourth is humidity. Hot, dry air and hot, humid air can create different watering needs and different disease pressure. The fifth is the intensity and duration of sunlight. 8 hours of northern summer sun is not always equivalent to 8 hours of southern sun on a concrete patio. The sixth is the temperature inside the container itself. A plant in the ground can send roots outward and downward into a larger mass of soil, where temperature and moisture change more slowly. A plant in a pot cannot escape the pot. The sides are exposed to sun and wind. The drainage holes may release water quickly. A black nursery pot sitting on concrete can become much hotter than a light-colored container standing on wood, soil, or an insulated surface. A small pot can move from comfortably moist to dangerously dry in a single hot afternoon. A large pot changes more slowly, but it can remain wet too long if drainage is poor. This is why watering by the clock is unreliable. The gardener in a hot, dry region may need to inspect containers every morning and again later during extreme heat. The gardener in a cooler or humid region may damage roots by adding water to a pot that is still wet below the surface. Instead of asking whether today is a watering day, feel the mix below the dry crust. Lift smaller containers to judge their weight. Check whether water can leave the drainage holes and observe the plant early in the morning. A cucurbit that droops briefly during a brutal afternoon but stands upright the next morning may not need the same response as a plant that begins the day wilted. So do not ask only, what month should I plant this? Ask, what does this crop need? What is my container doing today? And how much suitable season remains? The first crop proves why surviving frost is not the same as receiving enough heat to produce. That crop is okra. Okra is often treated as a simple summer vegetable, but it is more accurate to call it a true heat lover. In many southern gardens, okra seems to wake up just as other crops begin to struggle. Warm soil, warm nights, strong sun, and a long season allow it to move rapidly from a small seedling to a tall plant, producing flowers and tender pods. In a cooler northern garden, the same plant may survive after transplanting, yet spend valuable weeks growing slowly. That lost time matters, because a living plant is not necessarily a productive plant. In the hot south, wait until the soil is genuinely warm rather than reacting to one early warm spell. Once established, give okra a deep container with dependable drainage and enough soil volume to buffer moisture changes. A single compact plant can be easier to manage than crowding several full-size plants into one pot. Crowded roots and crowded foliage force the gardener to water more often and can reduce air movement in humid conditions. Keep the mix evenly moist while young plants establish, but do not keep it saturated. A surface mulch can slow evaporation and reduce sudden swings between wet and dry. Leave a small open space around the stem so moisture is not held constantly against it. As the plant begins producing, harvest pods while they are still tender. An overlooked pod can become tough quickly, and allowing many mature pods to remain can redirect the plant's energy towards seed production. Regular picking is not a promise of endless yield, but it helps keep the plant in a productive rhythm. In humid southern regions, space containers sow leaves can dry after rain. In hot, dry regions, protect the root zone from heat reflected by concrete or masonry. The leaves may tolerate intense sun, while the potting mix loses moisture much faster than expected. In the cooler north, the challenge is not merely avoiding frost. Okra also needs enough accumulated warmth and enough remaining season. Choose an early maturing or compact variety rather than the tallest, longest season option in the catalogue. Starting seed indoors can save time, but start it with a clear transplant date in mind. An okra seedling held too long in a small cell may become root-bound, stretched, or difficult to transplant without stress. Give seedlings strong light, harden them off gradually, and move them outside only when both daytime and nighttime conditions are reliably warm. In the central and transitional states, okra often faces a false start. A week of hot weather can be followed by cold rain and chilly nights. Portable containers provide an advantage here. You can move young plants to shelter during an abrupt cool spell, but repeated moving is not a substitute for planting at the right time. Watch the trend, not one afternoon. Also, watch drainage after heavy storms. Warm weather plants growing slowly in cool, waterlogged mix are especially vulnerable. The visual clue is simple. If an okra plant remains small, pale, and nearly unchanged while the potting mix is moist, adding fertilizer may not solve the problem. The limiting factor may be temperature. When warmth becomes consistent, healthy new growth should become more obvious. Okra reveals a lack of heat above the soil, but the next crop can look magnificent while hiding disappointment below it. That hidden crop is the sweet potato. Sweet potatoes can create one of the most deceptive container gardens. The vines may spill over the rim, cover a railing, and make the planting look wildly successful. Yet a beautiful canopy does not prove that storage roots are developing well. If the season is too short, the soil remains too cool, the container stays waterlogged, or the plant receives excessive nitrogen, the gardener may lift a mass of vines and discover far fewer usable roots than expected. In the hot south, plant healthy slips after the potting mix has warmed and cold nights are no longer likely. Use a wide, generous container with excellent drainage. Sweet potatoes need room for the root system to expand, and a larger soil volume changes moisture more slowly than a small pot. The goal is not constantly wet soil. During establishment, keep moisture steady so the slips do not repeatedly wilt. After growth becomes vigorous, allow the upper layer to begin drying between thorough waterings while preventing the entire root zone from becoming bone dry. Be cautious with nitrogen. A heavily fed plant can produce an impressive mass of leaves and long vines without giving the same priority to storage root development. Use a balanced approach based on the potting mix and the plant's condition, rather than feeding simply because the vines are green. Do not interpret every burst of leafy growth as evidence that the harvest below is increasing at the same rate. In humid southern regions, protect drainage. Raise the container slightly if water collects beneath it, and never let a saucer remain full after storms. In hot, dry regions, mulch can reduce surface evaporation, but the container still needs oxygen. Manage the vines so they do not smother smaller pots or create a dense, damp tangle. If your goal is edible, leaves as well as roots, harvest modest amounts without stripping the plant during its establishment period. In the cooler north, the most important resource is time. Start with vigorous slips and select a variety described as suitable for a shorter season. Put the container in the warmest, reliable, full sun location, but do not transplant into cold mix simply because the calendar says late spring. A pot can warm faster than garden soil, which is an advantage, yet it can also cool rapidly at night. Let stable conditions, not impatience, set the transplant date. In the Midwest and other transitional climates, heavy summer rain may be as important as heat. A rich mix that holds water beautifully during a dry week can remain saturated after repeated storms. Check drainage holes, keep the container from sitting in standing water, and adjust irrigation after rain. Do not follow a daily watering habit when the weather has already watered the pot. At harvest, judge success honestly. A container full of vines is valuable if you enjoyed the edible leaves or used the plant as living shade, but it is not proof of a large root crop. Record the variety, planting date, container size, and harvest date. Those notes will improve next year's timing far more than a generic calendar from another state. Sweet potatoes teach us to look below the visible growth. Cowpeas teach us something different. Sometimes the best strategy is not rescuing a struggling crop, but replacing it with a crop designed for the heat. Cowpeas, including southern peas and black-eyed peas, can keep producing in conditions that make common snap beans drop flowers or slow down. That makes them especially useful in hot southern summers. But heat-tolerant does not mean they should be planted in cold soil, crowded into a tiny pot, or fed heavily with nitrogen. Their greatest advantage appears when they are placed in the correct seasonal window. In the south, cowpeas can follow a spring crop of bush beans as temperatures rise. Choose a bush or semi-bush form for a compact patio, or provide a strong trellis if you select a vining type. Read the variety description before planting. The word cowpea does not tell you the plant's final size. Give the roots a container that drains freely, and avoid packing several vigorous vines into a space designed for one compact plant. Like other legumes, cowpeas can work with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, so excessive nitrogen fertilizer may create more foliage without improving pod production. That does not mean the plant needs no nutrition. Container mixes have limited reserves, and repeated watering carries nutrients away. Use a measured feeding plan appropriate for vegetables, but do not respond to every pause in flowering with a heavy dose of high nitrogen fertilizer. Decide what you plan to harvest. Tender young pods, fresh peas, and dry peas are harvested at different stages. Picking young pods regularly can encourage continued flowering, while allowing pods to mature for dry seed naturally keeps them on the plant longer. Both are valid goals, but they require different expectations. In hot, humid areas, trellising and spacing improve airflow. In dry areas, mulch and a larger soil volume help reduce rapid moisture swings. In the cooler north, cowpeas require deliberate timing. Wait for warm soil, choose an early variety, and place the container in full sun. A long vining, long season type may produce abundant foliage and still run out of weather before dry peas mature. If your season is limited, harvesting tender leaves or young pods may provide value earlier, but only use varieties and plant parts commonly grown for that purpose and prepare them appropriately. Kansudari help northern gardeners because they warm faster and can be moved. They also create risk because they cool quickly and dry quickly. Do not set young plants outdoors during a warm afternoon and leave them exposed to a cold night. Harden them gradually if transplanted, or direct sow once conditions are stable. Avoid disturbing the roots unnecessarily. In transitional climates, use cowpeas as a bridge crop. Spring beans may finish as the strongest heat arrives. Cowpeas can occupy the hottest window, and another crop of snap beans may be possible when late summer temperatures moderate. This is regional gardening at its best. You are not forcing one plant to perform for 6 months. You are matching different plants to different parts of the season. Cowpeas show how changing crops can maintain a harvest through heat. Eggplant shows a more complicated truth. A plant can love hot air above the soil while needing protection and consistency around its roots. Eggplant is one of the clearest examples of a crop with two different temperature stories. The leaves and stems grow poorly in cool weather, and young plants can stall when nights remain cold. Yet an eggplant rooted in a small dark container on a southern patio can also suffer when the potting mix becomes extremely hot and dry. The top of the plant asks for warmth. The root zone asks for stability. In the south, begin with enough container volume. A small decorative pot may look adequate when the transplant is young, but eggplant develops a substantial root system and a fruiting canopy that needs consistent water. Use a container with several drainage openings and enough weight or support to prevent tipping. Light-colored containers, reflective wraps around dark nursery pots, or a larger outer pot can reduce direct heating of the root ball. Keep drainage unobstructed. Mulch the surface after the plant is established, leaving breathing space around the stem. Water deeply enough to moisten the root zone. Then allow the mix to regain air rather than keeping it continuously saturated. During extreme heat, morning irrigation gives the plant access to moisture before the hottest part of the day. If the container still dries dangerously fast, the solution may be more soil volume, root zone shading, or relocation from reflected heat, not simply another shallow splash. Eggplant generally appreciates strong sunlight, but a container on a south or west-facing concrete surface can receive both direct sun and reflected heat. During severe heat, preserving morning sun while reducing the harshest late afternoon exposure can protect the plant without placing it in deep shade all day. Watch the new growth and flowers. Heat, drought stress, excessive nitrogen, and poor pollination conditions can all reduce fruit set. Harvest fruit while the skin is glossy and the flesh is still tender for the variety. Fruit left far beyond its usable stage becomes seedy and continues drawing energy. Use clean pruners because the stems can be tough and some varieties have spines. Support branches before heavy fruit bends them toward the rim. In the north, eggplant needs a head start. University Extension guidance commonly recommends starting seed well before outdoor planting because the crop grows slowly early in the season. Strong light is essential. A seedling started early but grown in dim light may become tall, weak, and less useful than a younger compact plant. Transplant only after frost danger has passed and nighttime temperatures are reliably mild. Eggplant does not thrive in a cool season, even if a few warm afternoons create false confidence. The key diagnostic question is whether the plant is failing because the air is too cool, the root zone is too hot, the mix is too wet, or the container is simply too small. The same drooping leaves can appear in several of those situations. Check moisture and temperature before acting. Above the soil, eggplant asks for heat. Below it, eggplant asks for moderation. Hot peppers create an even stranger regional contrast, because one gardener is racing against frost, while another may be trying to preserve the same plant through another season. Hot peppers reward patience, but the reason for patience changes by region. In a northern garden, the challenge is getting a slow-starting plant, mature enough to flower and ripen fruit before cold weather returns. In a hot southern garden, the challenge may be carrying an established plant through a period when extreme heat interrupts flower set. A pause is not always failure. In the north, start peppers early enough to gain time, but give them strong overhead light and adequate root space as they develop. Starting earlier does not help if the seedlings spend months stretched, crowded, and root-bound. Harden them off gradually. Move them outdoors only after frost danger has passed and nights have warmed. Pepper growth can remain slow in chilly conditions, and cold soil can erase much of the advantage gained indoors. Choose varieties with a realistic maturity period. Small-fruited hot peppers often ripen earlier than very large, thick-walled types, although variety descriptions should guide the decision. A container offers valuable mobility. It can sit in the warmest full-sun location during the growing season, move to shelter during an early cold night, and sometimes come indoors when autumn arrives. Bringing a plant inside, however, also brings the risk of aphids, mites, whiteflies, and other pests. Inspect it, isolate it from houseplants, and decide whether overwintering is worth the space and care. In the south, peppers may establish in spring, slow their flowering during the hottest period, and resume when temperatures become more favorable. Pepper flowers generally set best within a moderate nighttime range, and very high daytime heat can cause blossoms to abort. When that happens, do not assume the plant needs a strong fertilizer. Heavy feeding during stress can create soft growth or worsen nutrient imbalance without changing the weather. Keep moisture consistent, protect the root zone, and preserve enough foliage to shade developing fruit. Sun scald often appears when fruit is suddenly exposed after aggressive pruning or leaf loss. Remove only what is necessary for airflow, damage control, or plant structure. During extreme afternoon heat, a light shade cloth or a position with morning sun and filtered late-day light may reduce stress. Do not place the plant in dense shade for the entire day and expect the same flowering response. A hot pepper in a suitable frost-free or protected climate may live beyond one season, but survival is not guaranteed. Cold snaps, root disease, pests, and container limitations still matter. If you attempt to keep a plant, refresh the care plan rather than assuming an old potting mix and crowded roots can support indefinite production. Prune conservatively, check roots and drainage, and resume feeding when active growth returns. The important lesson is to separate a temporary pause from a permanent decline. Look for healthy new leaves, firm stems, and renewed buds when temperatures improve. Stabilize the environment instead of chasing flowers with fertilizer. And now we reach the crop that exposes the biggest myth in summer gardening. More heat does not always mean more fruit. That crop is the so-called heat-tolerant tomato. A tomato can carry the label heat-tolerant and still have a breaking point. That label usually means the variety has been selected to perform better than many ordinary tomatoes under warm conditions. It does not mean the pollen, flowers, leaves, fruit, and roots are immune to prolonged extreme heat. It does not mean a 5-gallon black pot on concrete can be ignored. And it does not mean every flower will become a tomato through the hottest nights of summer. In the hot south, variety selection is the beginning, not the entire strategy. Look for tomatoes described by reputable seed sources as heat-setting, disease-resistant for your region, and appropriate for your available space. A determinate plant produces much of its crop within a more concentrated period and may fit a large container more easily. An indeterminate plant continues growing and flowering, but requires stronger support, more root volume, and a longer management plan. Neither type is automatically superior. Match it to your season and goal. Give a container tomato at least the soil volume recommended for the mature variety. Extension guidance often treats 5 gallons as a minimum rather than an ideal maximum. Larger plants usually perform more consistently in larger containers because the root zone changes temperature and moisture more slowly. Use a potting mix designed for containers, not dense yard soil. Confirm that water can drain from several points, and place the container where runoff will not remain trapped underneath. Protect the root zone. A light-colored container, a breathable outer wrap that does not block drainage, mulch on the surface, and separation from hot pavement can all reduce stress. Shade applied to the pot is different from shade applied to the entire plant. In many cases, the best compromise is to keep the foliage in useful light while preventing the container wall from baking in direct afternoon sun. Water deeply in the morning when the root zone needs it, but base the decision on the pot rather than on a rigid schedule. A dry surface can hide moisture below. A wet surface can hide a dry lower root ball if previous watering was too shallow. Apply water slowly enough for the mix to absorb it, and continue until excess begins leaving the drainage holes. If water immediately races down a gap around the pot and leaves the center dry, re-wet in stages. If it refuses to drain, correct the blockage or saturated mix. Tomato flower set is sensitive to heat. Prolonged high daytime temperatures, especially when nights remain warm, can reduce viable pollen and cause flowers to fall. Water cannot cool an entire climate, and fertilizer cannot force pollen to function. During those periods, keep the plant healthy enough to resume flowering when conditions moderate. Avoid aggressive pruning that exposes fruit to direct sun. Avoid a heavy feeding intended to wake up a plant already stressed by heat. Maintain even moisture, protect roots, and watch for fresh flower clusters after the weather changes. In the cooler north, tomatoes face the opposite pressure: limited, warm days. Start transplants early enough to gain time, but not so early that they become oversized and root-bound before outdoor conditions are suitable. Provide strong light and room to grow. Harden them gradually. Plant after frost danger, and when the soil has warmed enough for active growth, a tomato sitting in cold mix may survive, yet lose weeks. Use the sunniest reliable location. A dark container or warm wall can accelerate early growth, and a movable pot can be protected during late cold nights. Choose early or compact varieties when the season is short. Determinate tomatoes can deliver a concentrated harvest, while an early indeterminate cherry tomato may begin ripening and continue until frost. Read the actual variety description rather than relying only on plant type. Northern containers still need heat protection during exceptional hot spells. If leaves curl, flowers fall, or the pot becomes painfully hot to the touch, shade the container and check moisture. The regional rule is not north equals full sun forever. It is use available warmth until it becomes stress. The midpoint lesson is important. More heat does not always create more growth, and heat tolerance has limits. A tomato plant can remain green while temporarily producing no new fruit. That pause is information, not a command to flood the roots or double the fertilizer. Keep the plant stable and prepare for the next favorable window. After tomatoes, the advantage swings sharply back toward the south, but with a leafy vine that many gardeners mistakenly treat like ordinary spinach. Malabar spinach follows a completely different seasonal clock. Malabar spinach is not true spinach. It is a tropical-style leafy vine that becomes useful when ordinary spinach has long since struggled, bolted, or disappeared in summer heat. In a hot, humid southern garden, it can climb rapidly and provide repeated harvests of thick leaves and tender tips. In a cool northern spring, the same vine may appear to do almost nothing. In the south, give it a strong trellis from the beginning. A mature vine can become heavy, especially after rain. Use a generous container with drainage and a moisture-retentive but airy mix. Malabar spinach appreciates consistent moisture, yet its roots should not sit in stagnant water. Mulch can reduce evaporation. In a humid area, avoid packing the vine against a solid wall where leaves stay wet and air movement is poor. Harvest young leaves and shoot tips regularly. Frequent tip harvest keeps the plant branching at a manageable height and provides more tender growth. If you stop harvesting, the vine can climb beyond reach, shade neighboring containers, and begin flowering heavily. The berries can stain, so place the container where falling fruit will not create a problem on pale paving. In the cooler north, treat warmth as a limited resource. Start plants indoors if needed, but provide heat and strong light. Do not transplant into a chilly patio container just because spinach would tolerate the weather. Malabar spinach waits for truly warm conditions. Put it in a sunny, protected microclimate and consider a dark container early in the season. A movable pot can be brought near a warm wall during cool periods and moved away if reflected heat becomes excessive later. Because the northern season is shorter, begin harvesting tender tips once the vine is growing vigorously rather than waiting for it to cover an entire trellis. The goal is a useful crop, not a photograph of the largest possible plant. As autumn approaches, cool nights will slow it sooner than kale or true spinach. The regional mistake is treating the word spinach as a care instruction. True spinach is a cool season crop. Malabar spinach is a heat-loving vine used in a similar culinary role. Its seasonal advantage is almost the opposite. The next leafy crop also loves summer warmth, but without regular harvesting, it can turn from tender greens into a tall, crowded plant. That crop is Amaranth. Amaranth can serve as a fast, colorful, leafy vegetable in warm weather, and some types can also be grown for seed. Those two goals require different management. A container gardener seeking tender leaves should harvest early and often. A gardener seeking grain must allow the plant to mature, become tall, and occupy the space much longer. Confusing those goals is one reason a productive leafy pot becomes woody and unmanageable. In the south, sow or transplant after conditions are warm. Thin decisively. A packet may contain many tiny seeds, but a container cannot support every seedling to full size. Crowded plants compete for water and become difficult to inspect for pests. For baby leaves, closer spacing and repeated cutting may be appropriate. For larger plants and repeated tip harvest, provide more room. Keep moisture steady. Amaranth tolerates warmth, but a container full of large leaves can lose water rapidly. Deep morning irrigation, adequate soil volume, and surface mulch reduce the cycle of severe wilt followed by flooding. Avoid placing a tall, mature plant where it shades an entire row of smaller pots. Pinching and harvesting the top encourages branching and controls height. In the cooler north, amaranth can still be useful because leaves can be harvested before the plant reaches full maturity. Wait until the soil is warm enough for germination, then use several small sowings instead of betting the entire crop on one date. Early sowings may stall in cold weather. Very late sowings may still provide baby leaves, even if seed never matures. Match the harvest goal to the time remaining. A warm pot and full sun speed growth, but northern gardeners should not let seedlings dry during establishment. The tiny seeds are planted shallowly, and the surface can dry quickly. Water gently enough to avoid washing seed into one corner. Once plants are established, thin them so the remaining roots have access to moisture and nutrition. Do not automatically fertilize a pale, crowded stand. First thin it. 10 hungry plants in a pot designed for 3 will not become healthier merely because more fertilizer is added. They need root space, light, air movement, and water. Container gardening rewards decisions about population as much as decisions about feeding. Amaranth teaches that harvesting can also be training. By cutting tender tips, you control height, improve branching, and keep the crop in its useful stage. Succession becomes even more important with bush beans, because their best season may sit on opposite sides of the summer peak, depending on where you live. Bush beans are called summer vegetables, but the phrase hides an important regional difference. In a cooler northern summer, bush beans can be planted in several successions from warm soil into midsummer, provided the last planting still has time to mature before frost. In the hot south, the best crops may come before and after the most punishing heat, rather than directly through it. In the south, plant an early crop after the soil warms. Harvest frequently, and watch what happens as daytime temperatures climb. Common green beans can abort flowers during extreme heat, especially when the soil is dry. If plants remain healthy but flowering falls apart, stabilize moisture and consider allowing the crop to finish instead of forcing it with fertilizer. Cowpeas may occupy the hottest window more reliably. When late summer temperatures moderate, a new sowing of bush beans can produce a cleaner, more vigorous crop than an exhausted spring planting. Use a wide container with good drainage. Bush beans do not require the deepest pot in the garden, but they need enough horizontal room and soil volume to avoid drying every few hours. Do not crowd the entire seed packet into one container. Good airflow matters in humid weather, and leaves that remain wet are more vulnerable to disease. Water the mix, not the foliage, whenever practical. In the north, wait until the soil is warm. Bean seed in cold, wet mix can rot, and growth is slow in cool conditions. Once warmth arrives, succession sowing is powerful. Plant a modest group, then another group roughly 2 weeks later, if your frost calendar and variety maturity allow it. The exact final sowing date depends on your location, expected frost, and the number of days listed for the variety. Count backward and include a safety margin because shortening days and cool nights slow late crops. In the central states, divide the risk among several pots. One planting may encounter heavy rain, another a heat wave, and another ideal weather. Small staggered plantings also prevent a single overwhelming harvest. Pick pods while tender. Leaving mature pods signals the plant to complete seed production. When an old bush bean becomes sparse and tired, extra fertilizer may create little benefit. Check for disease, root crowding, heat damage, and age. Sometimes, the correct action is to remove the plant, refresh the upper layer of mix if appropriate, and start the next crop. That same willingness to restart is even more valuable with zucchini, a plant that grows fast, produces fast, and can decline just as fast. Zucchini often enters the garden like a machine. The leaves expand, flowers open, and the first fruit seems to appear overnight. That speed encourages gardeners to believe one plant should remain productive all season. But age, squash vine borers in affected regions, powdery mildew, heat stress, root limitation, and repeated moisture swings can turn a once powerful plant into a poor use of valuable container space. In the south, target a favorable window. An early planting may produce before the worst heat and pest pressure. In areas with a long season, a later planting can replace the first when conditions improve. Do not wait until the old plant has completely collapsed before starting its successor. A young replacement growing nearby creates continuity and gives you a choice. Give zucchini a very large container and usually one plant per pot. Bush types fit containers better than long vines, but bush does not mean small. The broadleaves still need space, sun, and air movement. Water at the root zone in the morning, keep leaves as dry as practical, and mulch the surface. During brutal afternoon heat, temporary leaf droop may occur even when the soil contains moisture. Check the plant again after temperatures fall and early the next morning before assuming it needs repeated watering. Inspect the base of the stem, leaf stalks, and lower leaves. Sudden collapse, frass near the stem, damaged tissue, or rapidly spreading disease requires a different response from ordinary afternoon wilt. Remove badly diseased leaves with clean tools, but do not strip the canopy so aggressively that fruit becomes exposed to sun. Harvest zucchini while it is tender and appropriate for the variety. Oversized fruit continues drawing resources and can hide beneath leaves. In the north, wait for warm soil and protect young plants from late cold. Containers warm faster, and row cover style protection can help early growth. But covers must be managed when flowers need pollinators and when temperatures rise. Full sun is usually valuable. If the season is long enough, start a second plant several weeks after the first as insurance against pests or decline. Count the variety's maturity period against the expected first frost before starting a late replacement. In the central states, secure large leaves and pots before severe storms. After prolonged rain, do not resume automatic irrigation until the mix needs it. If an aging plant produces fewer flowers, smaller leaves, and recurring disease despite reasonable care, compare the likely remaining yield with the space it occupies. Restarting is not admitting failure, it is using the season wisely. With zucchini, knowing when to replace can matter more than knowing one more rescue trick. Cucumbers create the opposite temptation. Their leaves can wilt dramatically, and the immediate reaction is often to add water, even when the real problem is heat, damaged roots, disease, or a pot that is already saturated. Cucumbers need warm weather, a steady water supply, and a root zone with both moisture and air. Those needs sound simple until a hot afternoon turns every leaf limp. The time of day is your first diagnostic tool. A cucumber that wilts during extreme afternoon heat but recovers as temperatures fall may be protecting itself temporarily. A cucumber that is wilted at sunrise, when the air is cool, needs closer investigation. In the south, use a large container and a trellis strong enough to carry wet vines and fruit. Trellising saves floor space, improves airflow, and makes harvesting easier. Place the plant where it receives useful morning sun. In regions with severe afternoon heat, filtered late-day light may reduce stress. Keep the root zone mulched and evenly moist, but never assume more water is harmless. Saturated roots cannot function normally. Water slowly in the morning. If the mix is dry several inches down, irrigate thoroughly. If it is already wet, look for blocked drainage, root damage, stem injury, bacterial wilt where relevant, or other disease symptoms. Check whether the pot sits in a full saucer. Examine leaves for spots, discoloration, distorted growth, beetle feeding, and powdery coatings. A diseased vine will not recover simply because the soil becomes wetter. Harvest frequently. Overmature cucumbers become seedy and can reduce continued production. Keep fruit off hot pavement and watch for sun exposure where foliage has been lost. Avoid wetting leaves late in the day in humid climates when possible. In the north, direct sow or transplant after the soil warms. A compact bush cucumber may fit a smaller setup, while a vining type uses vertical space efficiently. Choose an early variety if the season is short. Protect young plants from cold nights, but remove or open covers when flowers need pollination and when heat builds underneath. Full sun helps the crop use the limited season, though even northern containers may need protection during an exceptional heat wave. Before watering a wilted cucumber, ask 3 questions. Is the mix actually dry in the root zone? Does the plant recover at night? Are there signs of disease or stem damage? Those questions prevent the common mistake of drowning a plant whose roots are already struggling. The final crop now reverses our entire comparison, because the cooler gardener may have the stronger summer advantage. That reversal belongs to kale and collards. Kale and collards reveal why no region wins every part of the year. These crops prefer steady growth without heat or moisture stress. Leaves grown through difficult heat can become tougher, more pungent, or bitter. In a cooler northern garden, kale and collards may continue producing through much of summer, especially with consistent water. In the hot south, their finest season is often fall, winter, or early spring, rather than the peak of summer. In the south, stop treating survival as the goal. A kale plant that remains alive in punishing heat may still produce poor quality leaves and attract heavy pest pressure. Plan for the cool season window. Start fall transplants while summer is still active, but protect young seedlings with light shade and careful watering until temperatures begin to fall. Gradually increase sun as conditions improve. Use clean containers, fresh or properly renewed mix, and inspect leaves for caterpillars, aphids, and other brassica pests. Collards generally tolerate warmth better than many kale types, but they also benefit from cooler conditions and steady moisture. Use a substantial pot, harvest outer leaves, and keep the central growing point intact. Do not crowd several mature plants into one small container. In a long southern season, staggered plantings can provide young plants as older ones become woody or pest damaged. In the north, kale and collards can use the cooler summer that limits okra. Give them sun, root space, and consistent water. Light afternoon protection can help during unusual heat, but they do not automatically need deep shade. Harvest outer leaves regularly. Begin fall crops while summer is still underway so plants are established before days become short. Kale can continue through cold that kills bush beans, making it valuable after tender crops finish. In the central states, start seedlings under light protection near the end of the hottest period. Then move them into stronger light as temperatures moderate. Several small sowings reduce the chance that one heat wave destroys the entire fall crop. Watch the forecast, but also watch the plants. Fast, tender growth is a better sign than merely staying alive. Here is the final reversal. Southern heat gives okra, sweet potatoes, cowpeas, Malabar spinach, and amaranth a long opportunity. Northern coolness gives kale and collards a quality advantage during periods when southern gardeners should wait. The question is not whether your state is good or bad for gardening. The question is, which crop owns the current window? All 12 crops can now be reduced to 5 questions. First, is the crop truly heat-loving, or is it merely frost-tender? Okra and Malabar spinach need sustained warmth. Tomatoes, bush beans, cucumbers, and zucchini are warm-season crops, but extreme heat can interrupt flowering or strain the plant. Kale and collards prefer a cooler window. The label "summer vegetable" is not precise enough. Second, what is happening inside the root zone? Consider container color, size, drainage, mulch, surface material, reflected heat, and wind. Touch the outside of the pot. Check moisture below the surface. Observe whether water enters the center of the mix and leaves the drainage holes. A plant cannot escape a dangerously hot, dry, or airless root ball. Third, is enough suitable season left? Read the variety's maturity information, check the expected first frost, and allow extra time for cool autumn weather. A northern gardener may need an early okra, pepper, sweet potato, or eggplant. A southern gardener may have time to replace an old zucchini, grow cowpeas through heat, and plant bush beans again later. Fourth, are the nights suitable? Daytime sun can mislead you. Cool nights stall tropical crops in spring. Very warm nights can interfere with tomato and pepper fruit set in summer. Look at the weekly pattern, not a single afternoon. Fifth, should this crop occupy the peak of summer or one side of it? Cowpeas, okra, Malabar spinach, and Amaranth can own the hottest period. Bush beans may perform better before and after it. Kale and collards belong to the cooler transition. Zucchini may be grown in successive generations instead of forced through one long decline. Tomorrow morning, walk through your containers before the day becomes hot. Look at each plant while it is cool. Feel the mix, inspect drainage, check the stem base, notice new growth, and review the nighttime forecast. Then, make one measured adjustment. Move a dark pot off concrete. Add mulch. Open a blocked drainage hole. Start a replacement zucchini. Sow a small batch of beans. Delay transplanting okra. Prepare kale seedlings for the approaching cool season. Do not change water, fertilizer, shade, and pruning all at once. When too many variables change together, you cannot learn what helped. Container gardening is an ongoing conversation with a small, rapidly changing root environment. Texas is not better than Michigan, and Michigan is not easier than Texas. Every region gives you an advantage with certain crops and a disadvantage with others. The best container gardener is not the person who copies a planting calendar perfectly. It is the person who notices what the roots, leaves, flowers, nighttime temperatures, and remaining season are saying, and adjusts before the plant pays the price. Tell us which state or growing region you garden in, and which of these 12 crops behaves most differently in your containers.